you're in the hospital and you're not physically able to get prostrate and to face Mecca, then you can do that lying on your back in your bed if your feet are facing Mecca. Let me skip those two parts. So, segregated care, they have a specific dress code in their ritual prayer and washing. They also have religious artifacts, items that they have on their person or jewelry that they wear that are considered sacred. So, if anyone who is not a Muslim touches it, those items become unclean. And the best practice in the clinical setting for all of us is, if it looks like a piece of religious jewelry and you're unsure, then do what we do whenever you see a spill. You've all heard the phrase, if it's wet and not yours, don't touch it. Have you all heard that yet? So in the hospital, that's basically the practice. You see some kind of spill or something wet, we don't know if it's contaminated or not. So don't touch it, go report it. Same thing here. If you're unsure if it is a religious artifact, then don't touch it. Ask permission. Ask the individual if it needs to be moved, ask them to move it. When you're narrating your care, you're constantly saying, I'm going to do this, I'm about to do this. And if there's something in the way, you can say, your jewelry here, I just need to have that moved. Can I do that, or would you like to shift that? So you can show respect, not touch it, not make it unclean, and still provide the care that you need to. Nothing should be replaced upon religious items, their Quran or sacred scriptures or anything that they have around them, and any of their jewelry kept dry and not removed unless absolutely necessary. But you can remove it for procedures. When patients are dying, Muslim patients, when they are dying, they want to be laid on their right side facing Mecca or on their backs with their feet facing Mecca. So if we had a Muslim patient in this room who was dying, what direction would we face our patient? Somebody point. We would face them this way. So from where we are in Little Rock, Arkansas, Mecca is to our east, maybe southeast. So our patients, we would face them this direction because that would be the general vicinity. Thanks to technology and smartphones, for those followers of Islam who want to have everything pinpointed and precise, there is an app that will orient them to the exact direction of Mecca from wherever they're located. It's more than just a compass. It is an app that they can use to get them directly pointed towards Mecca. So that is something for those who really want to follow to the letter of the law. All right, at the point of death, you get to these. The same thing goes for Muslim patients as it does for our Jewish friends. They want great respect shown for their bodies, segregated, touched as little as possible, covered, and never exposed at any time. They too do not follow any hastening of death or brain death. They will want to allow natural death. So there's a lot of similarity between the way we care for traditional Orthodox Jews and Muslim patients. Burial as soon as possible for them. Here are the 3 points at death. The 3 practices at death. Autopsies for Muslim patients are unacceptable. Cremation is also unacceptable. And organ donation is questionable. So we can see that Islam is very similar to traditional Orthodox Judaism when it comes to the practice of their faith. Traditional Orthodox Jews, autopsy, cremation, organ donation, all unacceptable. Essentially the same thing for Muslim patients. They don't want their bodies autopsied or cremated, and for Muslims, organ donation, I guess there's a little more wiggle room, so to speak. One final point for the Muslim faith is in the practice of their they will do once the baby has been washed is the baby is given to the mother, and then the first official act of communication between the parents and the child comes from the father, who will go over and whisper the call to worship in the child's ear. So for those who are strong adherents to the Muslim faith, when they have children, that is one of the practices that they will do and want to do in the clinical setting. So for those of you who want to do labor and delivery, that is something that you need to be aware of when you have Muslim patients. Okay, we've moved through that kind of quickly, and each one of these we move a little bit more quickly. Any questions so far? All right, let's look at our fourth major world religion, Hinduism. Here are the four basic religions of the Hindu faith. Number one, they believe in one God, or they say they believe in one God, but that God has many manifestations. So in practice, they're really not a classical monotheistic religion. They're really a polytheistic religion, because they worship a variety of gods, even though they say that that's all one God. So that is the biggest deviation between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam to Hinduism, is their concept of God. God has many manifestations in Hinduism. Number two, in this point, our Hindu friends agree with our Jewish, Muslim, and Christian friends, because they too teach that God is the creator, sustainer, and destroyer of the world. This is the one point that at least four of our major world religions all agree upon. That it is God who created the world, God is the one who sustains it, and ultimately it will be God who destroys it. Point number three under Hinduism is they have a cyclical view of time. And this goes along with point number four, their belief in the path of karma and reincarnation. So for Hindus, they view time in a cyclical fashion. And that's what supports their belief in reincarnation. Death isn't the end. It is really better described as a rebirth. So an individual is born, lives, and instead of dying, is reborn into a new existence. And karma is what determines what that new existence will look like. So for Hindus, if you have lived a good life, you've been a moral person, a good person, you've taken care of people, then when you are reborn, you will come back into a higher life form. And that could be a higher form of in the animal kingdom, or it could be a higher form in their social strata. Hinduism is primarily rooted in the eastern part of the world, India being one of the primary countries. And India is a good example of a social caste system. So in the Indian culture, there is still a strong distinction between the lower caste and the upper caste. And you don't move in and out of those social stratas in India. So if you're born in the lower caste, that is where you will live, marry, and have a family and die. You don't move up into the upper caste. That's very different than the way we view things in the United States, because we have that rugged individualism that says if you work hard enough and persevere, you can achieve anything you want to. And you can go from rags to riches. That is a very common theme in the United States. But in India, that is not so. The only way you can move from the lower caste to the upper caste is through karma and reincarnation. So if you were born into the lower caste and you've lived a good moral life, you were a wonderful person, then your hope and belief is that when you are reborn, you will be reborn into the upper caste. If you were not a good person, if you were born in that upper caste and you were not a good person, you, in your reincarnation, you would be born in the lower caste. Or you might be born as an animal, a reptile, maybe a snake or a frog or something. Something undesirable if you lived a bad life. So those are the core principal beliefs for the Hindu faith. Let's talk about application in the clinical setting. They too wear a lot of religious jewelry, a lot of metal jewelry. So Muslims and Hindus will have religious artifacts on their persons. And it is preferred that those items stay with them, but they can be removed if a procedure prevents it. So they've got metal jewelry on, they don't need to go get an MRI with that jewelry on. That can be removed, kept clean, kept dry, kept protected while their procedure is taking place. Hindus also practice fasting, and they have dietary restrictions very similar to the Jewish faith. So for Hindus, most of them are vegetarian. Their restriction is no meat. But not all Hindus are vegetarian. Some will eat, they will not eat beef or pork, so some will eat chicken and fish. So that's something important to know if you have a Hindu patient, that they will not eat beef or pork if they are not vegetarian. And then, one of the final points in the Hindu faith, and regarding the application of their belief, is that they are a very communal culture, meaning they make family decisions. They want everybody to have a say. They want the whole family involved when important decisions are being made. So if they have a loved one, like the patriarch or the matriarch of the family who is at the point of death or considering a terminal diagnosis, whatever the condition might be that's serious or traumatic, Hindu families would want the doctor to come in and talk to the whole family. And they would, as a family, would want to hear and receive the information. There would likely be a designated spokesperson, probably the eldest member of the clan, but they want the entire family to be a part of the medical decisions and legal decisions made for their loved ones. So for Hindus, we should avoid touching their bodies when caring for them at death. Do not wash them, and do not remove any of their religious jewelry or objects. Keep your eyes closed and their limbs straight. Hindus prefer cremation. And therefore, because of state and federal laws, they need to be cremated within 24 hours. Here are the 3 points of practice at death. Autopsies for Hindus are not prohibited or forbidden. They just dislike them because it delays their funerals. So they want their bodies cremated as their preferred method of body disposal. And they want them cremated within 24 hours. They have to. So they will cremate quickly and then do any ritual observance after that. And for Hindus, organ donation is acceptable, which makes sense because in Hinduism, they believe that their lives, their spirits are continually being reborn. And the ultimate state for a Hindu follower to get to is that of nirvana. That's where they just, if they continue to live good life and karma rewards them, and in their next life, ultimately their goal is to get to nirvana. So organ donation makes sense because that can help the next spirit that would inhabit the body that they are leaving behind, or the body that is needed for another spirit. So that follows with their belief system. That makes pretty good sense. Okay, that was a pretty quick review of the Hindu faith. We don't see a lot of Hindu patients at Baptist Health Little Rock or North Little Rock in our Central Arkansas area. There are, on occasion, you will have Hindu patients. But like I said, that is not a regular occurrence. So that takes us to our fifth and final world religion, that of Buddhism. Buddhism also centered in the eastern part of the world, like Hinduism is. And one of the biggest differences, generally speaking, in Buddhism and the other major world religions is that Buddhism is really considered a way of life. And in the eastern part of the world, people will accept whatever belief helps them cope with the circumstances of their life. So, a Buddhist does not have any trouble accepting Jesus because Jesus could help them in the afterlife. They will not give up their Buddhist beliefs to adopt a Christian lifestyle, but they will accept the teachings of Jesus in conjunction with their Buddhist beliefs. And they will accept the teachings of Confucius. They will accept Taoist principles. They will accept other faith beliefs. Whatever system works to help them cope with whatever their circumstances are in life, Buddhism is open and adopts that. So that, even though we call it a world religion, there is a strong philosophical component that this is more like a way of life for people. In that way of life, they have what are referred to as the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth of Buddhism is life is suffering. Life is suffering. We're all born into an existence where suffering exists. Secondly, Buddhism teaches this suffering is caused by our desires. So when we experience any, if our desires are not being met, that is considered suffering. So everything from I'm hungry, I didn't have anything in my house to eat, I don't have any money right now, I can't go get something to eat. There is a sense of physical suffering because you're hungry. This is a very simplistic example, but there is that sense that there's some suffering associated with it. It's because you have this physical desire for food. Let's say that you're in a dating relationship and your partner decides they don't want to be in a relationship anymore and they break up with you. That makes you very sad. You might even get depressed. You might struggle to focus and concentrate in school and work. Well, you're suffering emotionally because of a desire to be with this other person. So that's what they mean by the suffering that we that we experience is caused by the desires that we have. Their third principle, though, is that suffering can be overcome. Even though we're born into a life that is total suffering, and it's caused by our human condition, by the desires within our physical being, or I guess physical, spiritual, emotional being, we can overcome suffering. And that is accomplished by following the Eightfold Path. If you follow the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, it will lead to the end of suffering. So you can see, just looking at their Four Noble Truths, how Buddhism really is a way of life. And I'm going to put the Eightfold Path up on the screen, and that will also reinforce how do this, follow this. It's a way of living that reinforces that concept. Is everybody good? All right, so here's the Eightfold Path. Let me put it up there, let you write while I talk it through. The Eightfold Path consists of having a right view, seeing things in the right kind of way, having right intentions, doing things for the right reasons, not for selfish gain, having the right speech, both in the words that you use and in the way that you speak. So not using profanity or offensive language, and not shouting and screaming, but instead speaking calmly and politely and quietly. Having the right action, behaving in ways that are considered right and good and appropriate. Having the right livelihood, making your living in the right kind of ways, not at the expense of someone else. Buddhists might have a real problem with the tobacco industry because there's addictive properties in cigarettes and other tobacco products. And that's like you're making money off of somebody else's addiction. That would not be considered the right livelihood. Give forth the right effort. Do things well. Have the right mindfulness and the right concentration. That is the Eightfold Path. If you follow these 8 instructions, then that will lead you to overcome the suffering that is inherent within our physical life. So when we have Buddhist patients, there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of. One, because of that right mindfulness and right concentration, they will likely prefer meditative techniques and prayer and other forms of pain and symptom management. So they may refuse physical medication. Buddhism falls under, I think we mentioned 2 weeks ago, the traditional Thai medicine and traditional Chinese medicine. Though the practices within both of those religious groups, there are strategies and alternatives that they would opt for over just taking medication. And then, secondly, they would request and desire time for meditation in the clinical setting in order to deal with their pain and symptom management. But also just have the right mind, have the right concentration, keep yourself focused and centered, and alleviate suffering as much as possible. So, for Buddhists, autopsies are acceptable, as is cremation. It is their preferable method of body disposal, and organ donation in Buddhism is possible. This picture here is an image that has some urns. They've got pictures of the individuals, little plaques that probably have their birth and day deaths. They're all painted up. They're very ornamental, very pretty. This is one of the ways that Buddhists show respect for their deceased, for their loved ones, is by having these ornamental urns, because cremation is their preferred method. And just because I think this is an interesting thing for you to know, whenever an individual is cremated, we usually say those are their remains, or those are their ashes. But just so you know, the technical term is cremains. So for someone to be cremated, what is left is their cremains that we typically put in some type of urn and then either bury, put in a mausoleum, or display on our shelves at home. I mean, lots of people do that. Okay, that is the 5 major world religions. Now, what I need to do quickly is talk about 2 mainline Christian faith groups. Last week, we talked about the mainline Christian beliefs, and then I have this other category. There are 2 groups that I want to address here in our last few minutes, because their belief systems are significant and it impacts us in the clinical setting. The Jehovah's Witnesses are the first of these 2. So, let me put these up here and let you write, and I'll talk through them. Jehovah's Witnesses teach and believe that God is a singular being. So Jehovah's Witnesses really are more like Muslims and Jews in their concept of God. Although also, they use the Christian name for God, Jehovah. They, consistent with mainline Christianity, they do believe that Jehovah is all-knowing and all-present. Here is a point that they deviate from the mainline Christian teaching. Because Jehovah's Witnesses believe that God used Michael, who is identified in the Christian scriptures as an archangel, to create the world, to create all of the universe that existed. Mainline Christian teaching says that Jesus was the creative agent in the world. And you'll notice there in parentheses, Jehovah's Witnesses believe in an old earth, meaning that the earth is millions and billions of years old, as opposed to the young earth theory that coincides with the creation account in the Christian scriptures. So Jehovah's Witnesses believe that after Michael created the world, then he took on the form of Jesus. And as Jesus lived a sinless life and died for human sin. If we were to take this one statement in isolation, Jesus lived a sinless life and died for human sin. If we were to take that out from the overall list, that completely consistent with mainline Christian teaching. Jesus lived a sinless life and died for human sin. That is exactly what the mainline Christian faith teaches. But we have to keep it in context with what the overall Jehovah's Witness teaching is. So Jesus did live a sinless life, but it was because Jesus was first in the form of Michael, and Michael was an archangel who created the world. Jehovah's Witnesses who are faithful to God's organization on earth will be spared eternal annihilation. So while Christianity, Judaism, and Islam all believe in a metaphysical existence where we, after we leave this physical world, our spirits reside on, Jehovah's Witnesses teach that if you do not go to heaven, and they classify heaven in two different ways, then you will be annihilated. So that is probably one of the bigger differences, a second or third bigger difference between Jehovah's Witnesses and mainline Christian teaching. Because Christianity, mainline Christianity teaches there is a literal heaven and a literal hell. Judaism and Islam also teach the concept of heaven and hell. But Jehovah's Witnesses say that there is a special place. Heaven is a special place reserved for 144,000 people, those who are born again. If you don't fall into that number, but you've lived a good life, then you will reside on paradise earth. If you have lived a wicked life, you will be annihilated at your death. So they do not believe in a literal hell. They do not believe in a place of eternal torment. If you've lived a good life, you'll enter into one of two phases of heaven, and if you don't, you will be annihilated and you'll just cease to exist. I almost always get the question, where do they get this 144,000 number? The best explanation that I have comes from talking to some Jehovah's Witnesses and my own personal research. That number comes from a scripture in Revelation where it talks about the 12 tribes of Israel, and there is a remnant of each of the 12 tribes that comes before the throne of God and lays down their crowns to worship God. There are 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes, and when you do the math, it equals 144,000. So that's the best explanation that I have for that number. During illness, Jehovah's Witnesses will carry an advance directive card to let us know that they refuse blood transfusions or blood-based products. Also, Jehovah's Witnesses typically do not want prayer from a non-Jehovah's Witness. Some may, but that typically they prefer that they don't. So here's where they get, let me just put this up here quickly also, their explanation for abstaining from blood-based products comes out of these three passages in the Christian scriptures. Genesis and Leviticus in particular talk about not eating, not consuming blood, that we're not to consume blood. And so in those books, in Genesis and Leviticus, God was giving laws to help his people. And while they didn't know that those laws were in their best interest physically and for hygiene purposes, that was the intent of God saying, do not consume blood, because it may not be healthy for you. So that is the literal understanding of what those passages mean. The Jehovah's Witnesses have taken that and say, no, that means that the blood is sacred, that's where our life comes from, and the scriptures say it should not be consumed. Therefore, we should not put it into our bodies in any form. And then spiritually, they would say, when we abstain from the use of blood products, that is us stating that it's only the blood of Jesus that can save for eternity. When we have Jehovah's Witnesses at death, autopsies are possible, cremation is acceptable, and organ donation is also possible if it can be done without cross-contamination of blood. So there are some organ parts. I don't know if skin is one of them. I don't know if our corneas are one of them. But there are some of our organs that it's possible to do a transplant without cross-contamination of blood products. And another way that Jehovah's Witnesses address this need for health care is through the development of their own hospital systems. So just like we have Baptist Hospital that came out of the Arkansas Baptist State Convention, and St. Vincent's that came out of the Catholic Church, and in some parts of the country you have Jewish hospitals, St. Jude in Memphis that comes out of the Jewish belief. They have Jehovah's Witness-based hospitals that operate in ways that are consistent with their faith beliefs. So that's one of the ways that they address that need for health care. Okay, very quick, the last group, the Christian Science movement. Christian Science. This is a group that came about as a result of, again, a distortion of the mainline Christian teaching from a woman named Mary Baker Eddy. Christian Science was established in the late 1800s, 1879, I think. And this has roots in Gnostic teaching. The Christian Science movement has roots in Gnostic teaching. So they are consistent with mainline Christianity in their first 3 points. That the Bible is the eternal guide, is the guide to eternal life. That is sacred Christian scriptures. That God is supreme and eternal and all-powerful, all-knowing, omnipotent, omnipresent. And that humanity is made in God's likeness. Where they deviate the most is in point number 4. This idea that the forgiveness of sin occurs through the destruction of sin and the acknowledgement of the non-existence of evil. That is essentially a Gnostic teaching that says, spirit is good, matter is evil. Our physical bodies are matter. We're made up of mineral and blood and bone. And so we're made up of material things. Therefore, our physical bodies are evil. It's our spirit that is good. And so we have to overcome evil in our spirit. Because it's our body, our physical body, that causes us to sin and keeps us from receiving all of the goodness life has to offer. They also teach that Jesus was not the Son of God, nor was he co-equal to God, but he is our example for life. So they call Jesus the great way shower. Jesus shows us the way to live. He shows us how to live. But he is not co-equal with God. He is not all-powerful with God. He is not God's son. He's just a great example for us. Is everybody okay on that? All right. Last, and I'm going to skip that because I got to get to this last point here for you. So, at the point of death, Christian Science do not accept autopsies, cremation or burial. Either one is acceptable. And they will receive organ donations, but not organ reception. So they will make organ donations, but not receive organ reception. That would be consistent with that belief. Our physical body is evil, so we're not going to receive physical matter from somebody else into our body. But they are willing to be organ donors. Okay, so we're going to run through that last little bit very quickly. Do you have any questions? Yes, that's stated in your notes. What is the unique issue? They do not seek medical care. Typically, they do not go. Now, it's not that they don't have, they're not forbidden from going to seek medical care, but their practice is not to. All right, good question.